Good afternoon, everyone. Warm welcome to the Alt webinar for CMALT Getting Started. It's lovely to see you here. Thank you very much for joining in. We'll just give a minute just to see if there's any last minute arrivals as we're starting at 1 o'clock. Hopefully you'll be able to use the chat, and it'd be great to know who you are and what level of CMALT you're looking at. And if you don't know, then this is certainly the webinar for you. If you do know, this is the webinar for you as well. So if you just want to say hello in the chat, that'd be great. Tell me where you are. And if you can't access the chat, we'll sort that out. Hi, Joanne. This is good. This is the very beginning of your CMALT journey. So um, this is about finding out everything you have. I got to cover quite a lot today. I'm going to cover from the very beginning all the way through the process of doing the certified membership scheme, and plenty of time for questions as well. I'll try and break up the session so we've got some opportunity just to take a bit of time just to deal with any questions as they arise, but there'll be some Q&A time at the end as well. Okay, so first of all, just say my name is Matt Cornock. I'm actually head of online learning at University of Leeds. I'm a senior CMALT holder. I've been an assessor since 2012, I think, and I'm also an alt trustee. So it's a pleasure to be welcoming you all to this session today. The session's being recorded. I will keep an eye on the chat as well. So if any questions come up through the chat, it's lovely to see actually that we have so many different people joining these webinars, and the applicability of the certificate membership to a lot of different people all around the world in all sorts of different roles, in all sorts of different sectors. And as we look at today, there are some things that bind us all together. And I think that's really the key thing about CMALT, that it's there's a lot of people who work in learning technology, but it's a very wide-reaching scheme. So without further ado, we'll be looking at places for help and guidance for CMALT, an overview of the different pathways, how the portfolio is constructed, some of the key principles for writing your portfolio, and also the actual content you're expected. I'll do a quick overview of the CMALT assessment process and then what happens afterwards. So if you haven't yet seen already, you should definitely take a look at the guidance that's available on the Association for Learning Technology website at alt.ac.uk and find the link to CMALT. Everything you need is on there, and it outlines all the key benefits along with the guidance you need to put your CMALT together. If you're interested in mappings as well to other schemes that you may have been part of, then all that detail is on the website. If there's at any point you can't find the thing that you need, just reach out and we'll help you. So in the slide deck that goes alongside this, which if you don't have a link to, we'll share a link to afterwards, you'll be able to use all these direct links as well. So moving on to an overview of CMALT. So why do we have CMALT? Well, it's a really, really cool scheme, actually. And it's something that I got into when I first started working in learning technology. I realized actually I needed some recognition for the specialist expertise that we have, bringing together that pedagogical knowledge and that technical knowledge. We operate in a really interesting space as learning technologists. And I mean learning technologists in a very, very broad sense. It's any professional who is, as it says here, involved in that use of learning technology, supporting education, supporting learning, both UK and internationally. And it's peer assessed. So you actually sharing your work with colleagues who are also fellow learning technologists, and they will provide feedback on your portfolio. And the key thing is here as well that it's not feedback on your practice in the sense that you may be doing something very simple or you may be doing something very complicated. but the portfolio is a very reflective process. And that peer assessment actually is about showing that you're understood by your peers and you're able to convey your professional practice in your own context to another colleague. So that's what makes it really interesting. It's about us as a whole community. Now, there are three pathways: associate, CMALT, and senior, and I'll go through the detail of those and how you make a choice between those as well. So the peer-based model then, with the support that you've got through the documentation, there's also example portfolios there. So we've got this webinar where we can have some Q&A. There's also portfolios available on the website, so you can see examples of what people have done before. And then that process of assessment, the reviewers, there's two reviewers and they review independently. And then we come together and come to a joint decision. So when we get to that joint decision, we then provide you with some feedback as well. And if you do want to reassess, if there's a gap in your portfolio, we ask you to resubmit, then that feedback will help you resubmit. And I think what's really important to take away from that process, though, this is a developmental exercise. This isn't a rubber stamping. And I think that's really, if you go into CMALT with a view that this is about your development, enabling you to progress, then that's the kind of right attitude to take here. Once you've done your CMALT, then you become part of the CMALT community, and you've got the opportunity then to become an assessor as well and provide your feedback to other colleagues, but also to learn from other people's CMALTs. And this is why I do it, because I love seeing practice across the full community and I would say borrowing some ideas that are shared in portfolios, but it gives me an opportunity to reflect on where I am as well. So it's a really positive community and a positive experience. So to gain this status, and it's a really important status to have in our sector, you see it on jobs being advertised. You see it being quite highly featured on people's email footers and LinkedIn profiles. It's a badge of honor, to be recognized by your peers as adhering to the CMALT standard. And the CMALT standard comes from the way it's structured and also the core principles, which we'll go through as well. So the whole framework here, this is a bit of a blurry slide, but all the detail we're going to go through today, and it's about bringing together all these different competencies, the core principles, and depending on the level of CMALT you do, how specialist areas or advanced areas of practice. So first of all, what is learning technology? And this is really important because if you're working in higher education, which I can see some of you are, it's great to see that listed on the chat. Thank you very much for sharing where you're coming from. If you're coming from higher education, or if you're coming from further education, or if you're coming from the professional learning sector, this is about you in your context and the recognition that learning technology takes many different forms, and how we work with learning technology takes many different forms, whether you're there to support it, implement it, support educators using it, whether you are a course developer who's creating online courses, or whether you're someone who's involved in the mechanics of putting all the integrations together. However you do your practice, CMALT is about having that sound pedagogical understanding to inform your decisions about the technology, and having that sound technological understanding to inform your decisions about the pedagogy that can be implemented as well. So there's a really nice interplay between those two. And I think for me, that always is the key part of the core principles, that interplay between learning and technology. There are other core principles as well, which are equally important, including that ability to communicate and disseminate best practice. So you want to see how you're being part of the community. The community is such an important thing for the Association for Learning Technology. Every member of the community is there to contribute and support each other. So we really do want to see that coming through in portfolio submissions. Also, being able to keep up to date, and obviously it's one of the reasons why we're still in existence, to be honest, because technology changes all the time, pedagogy changes all the time, educational contexts change all the time, and so we're having to navigate through all of that, and we need to keep up to date with it. So evidencing that's really important. And then finally, that empathy and willingness to learn from colleagues, recognizing that we work quite often as part of a team or as part of an organization. I've always said it's very rare to find someone who does everything on their own, completely isolated from anyone else. We do have that contact with other people with different specialisms. We have contact with people in our own community, and we obviously have contact with our learners. So the portfolio. Portfolio can actually be any digital format as long as you can share it with an assessor. So that could be a web link to a website. It can be even a Word document or a PDF. But the main thing is that it's being able to be shared with an assessor digitally, because as an assessor, I could be assessing anywhere. Sometimes I'm assessing on my tablet. Sometimes I've got my laptop or my desktop, and it could be anywhere. So make sure that it's fully digitally accessible. And then also make sure it's fully digitally accessible compliant in terms of that digital accessibility aspect, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So making sure you're using heading structures, alt text and images as the key things that we tend to need actually as assessors to help us navigate portfolios. But yeah, to make sure that your content is also accessible. Please feel free to use images and multimedia. You can include videos, you can include um, links to articles or things that you worked on, photos, montages, really interesting for us to see things in practice. Just bear in mind though, that when you're presenting your evidence, and I'll come on to it a bit later, you need to be quite selective as well and focused. So you wouldn't want to expect an assessor to read a very long document. You might want to just highlight the bits that you want to focus on as part of your evidence. So there's a bit of balance there. Please make sure you do cover all the sections of the portfolio. Sometimes we have portfolios that are missing sections, but that also needs to apply to, as we'll see later, the different subsections in each section. Read the guidance document thoroughly. And one of the key things in that guidance document is about how you can convey your practice succinctly. So we are looking out for that. And then finally, if you are in the position where you're going to take a bit of time over your portfolio, or if you want to be able to share your portfolio later, try not to put it within a locked system, for example, in an institutional system that you can't then port out to yourself. It's very good to have options that are yours rather than your institutions if you can. There are lots of different portfolios available, but as I said, it could be any format. It could be a Word document, it could be your own website, it could be an e-portfolio, plenty of different ways that you could look at conveying your expertise. So if you have any questions about sort of whether a portfolio is okay or not in terms of format, then please do pop it into the chat. I've seen portfolios in a whole range of different formats. I've even seen video portfolios as well. So if that is the best way that you can convey your experience and expertise, then think about what's going to work for you. So your style of portfolio should be in a narrative form. So it's not a series of bullet points. We actually want you to be able to convey the story, your story, and but in a very succinct way. So you can use headings and subheadings to help break this down. And just to think about me as an assessor, I don't know all the detail and all your context. So if you've got acronyms, please expand them into their full length descriptions. If you've got some sort of local terminology or sort of like what you call things internally, we'll need that bit of context to help us interpret your portfolio too. So just watch out for that. Quick question from Catherine in terms of, is it okay to do a portfolio within Articulate Rise? Yes, it is. Just make sure that you watch out for some of the accessibility in Articulate Rise. Sometimes I've ended up with some keyboard traps in there and some of the headings didn't quite work out, but Articulate Rise, absolutely fine. And actually can be quite, I think Sway is another good one for that, where you want to present things in a particular way and bring things together. Yeah, go for it. Go for it. It's a good way actually to show your technical capability, but also make sure that whatever you choose for your portfolio is justified. You should spend more time on the content, I think, than how good it looks. Just as a bit of advice in terms of where to spend your time. There's no prescribed workout, but I would highly recommend not going above 500 words for each subsection. So 1A, 1B, 1C, try to keep it under 500 words for each one of those subsections. Because if you don't, it then becomes very difficult for an assessor to really drill down into your practice, because it's just too much to grab hold of. So it shouldn't be War and Peace. Just think very carefully about what the criteria is asking you to do. Evidence, you will need to have evidence. It can be alongside your narrative, if it flows very nicely that way, or it can be an appendix. But if you do have an appendix, you need to link through. So please don't just have references to documents that the assessor has to then find out somewhere else. It's really important to link the evidence where it's actually needed. So if you're having an appendix, I do an appendix at the end of each subsection. So 1A would have its own evidence appendix rather than a big repository of everything. So description. Every portfolio section has three parts: description, evidence, and reflection. So description, first of all, as I've already alluded to, quality over quantity. Think really carefully about the examples you want to bring in. And one of the tips I'd give you right now is take a look at the framework for the portfolio and start to think about how some of your practices can map against different sections. You can use the same example in multiple sections, but if you do that too much, you're not then showing your breadth of practice. And so you actually don't actually achieve some of the criteria of the portfolio, because you're just using the same thing over and over again. So it's better to use one or two examples for each subsection and map your practice against the portfolio. And it might be something that you do first of all. And then you can identify any gaps. And over the next 3 to 6 months, you can undertake a bit of work to fill those gaps in your practice. Really important to put the context in there. So you need to assume that your assessor knows nothing about where you're working. We will read the context statement at the beginning of your portfolio, but there's obviously some gap between what's in your head and what's in my head. So don't make any assumptions that I'm going to be able to interpret what you say. Be very clear about your role as well. So as I said earlier, we always work in teams, or we're working with other people. Avoid statements that say we did, or we produced, or we created. Think about what you individually contributed. So if you are working in a team, the one way I like to think about it is, if you weren't there, what would have happened? So if you weren't in that team, what would have been the consequence of that? Because that actually helps you work out what your impact and what your contribution was. So be very clear about your role in any group activity. Use I throughout, the first person throughout your narrative. It's not often seen in academic writing, not in some other accreditation schemes. Really important in CMALT to talk about you as an individual and your practice. I'll come on to reflection in a second, and in terms of the impact as well. So reflective writing. I would strongly recommend that you have a section in every subsection. So for 1A, you have a section called reflection. 1B, you have another section called reflection, and structure your portfolio that way. It gives you the opportunity there to demonstrate against this criteria. Every section is graded for description, evidence, and reflection. If you're missing a reflection, you can't pass that section. So it just helps make sure that you are putting in that reflection in there. And reflective writing, I would strongly recommend using these questions. Your reflection is not about a commentary on the sector or a commentary on your context. Your reflection should be on you as an individual and your professional practice. So it needs to be about what you have learned, what you would do differently next time, what might have gone better or could be done better, or what was the success criteria here, and what did you contribute in terms of that. It's really, really important. This is the whole point of CMALT, if I'm honest. I find that CMALT is one of those wonderful schemes that gives you the time and the permission to just take stock. So it's really thinking about where you've been, where you're going to, where you are right now, and giving that moment of reflection. And that last sentence on this slide here about enabling you to demonstrate how you developed over time is a really important one, particularly if you're looking at senior CMALT as well. So I'm just going to pause on that. And if there are any questions on reflection, I don't know if mics are available. If you wanted to use your mic, you can, if it allows you to. If there's anything you want to ask about description or reflection. No? Okay. Evidence. When you're doing something, try and gather as much evidence as you can. So if you're in the middle of a project at the moment, think about what evidence you can include in your portfolio. We had a whole range of evidence before, including links to full courses, as I mentioned before, links to articles, presentations, videos, emails and letters from colleagues, learner data in terms of evaluation data. That's the best type of evidence, actually, if you've got some sort of evaluation side of things. Whatever it is, obviously there are a couple of rules, particularly around personal data. Make sure your portfolio is GDPR compliant, and make sure that you are not sharing any personal data. So that's rule number one. Rule number two is around the age of your evidence. And again, this relates actually to some of the examples when you put into your portfolio. This is a slightly looser rule, but I would generally say 2 to 3 years is kind of your cutoff. If you've got something that's 5 or 6 years old, you're not able then to demonstrate that you're keeping up to date with the current trends in learning technology, for example. So you might want to just be careful about drawing on things that are too old. So try and look at examples of practice within the last 2 to 3 years, if you can. And you can use the same example and evidence across different parts of the portfolio, as I mentioned, but make sure you've got enough evidence of practice that you're not wholly dependent on a couple of big examples. So Owen, you've made a really good question there. Would videos on YouTube be okay for evidence? So if you're linking to something on YouTube, I'd want to know as an assessor what your specific contribution is. So if it comes on your channel, fine. Tell me, did you write the content? Did you do the production? Tell me those sorts of things so I know that's demonstrating your particular practices. If it's a video of you doing a presentation at a conference, then I want to know, how did that conference presentation get put together? Were you working with someone else? What was your specific contribution? So the evidence is there to back up the description and to support your reflection. I hope that helps, Owen. So we've got these 3 stages: description, evidence, reflection. And what you want to do then is pick a couple of examples for each subsection, saying exactly what you did, what your contribution was, the evidence that shows your contribution, your specific contribution, and then reflecting on your practice using those prompts. If you've never done reflective writing before, I would recommend just taking one or two of those questions that I showed you earlier, that's in the guidance as well, and actually just dropping those in to your portfolio. So under the reflection heading, just put those questions in, and then that will structure your reflection, and it will just help you go through that reflective process. Content. So the portfolio is structured into a number of areas, and those areas change depending on the level of CMALT that you're, the pathway of CMALT that you're looking at. So the associate CMALT is really there for those who are starting out in the field of learning technology. Could be a whole range of different roles. I've seen associate CMALT portfolios from librarians, from interns, but also from academics who are just trying to expand into the digital education sphere. And those who are very early on in career, so sort of in initial roles, the first roles that they've got, where generally thinking that you don't necessarily have the full breadth of evidence yet to apply for CMALT. So the associate CMALT is a really good first step. And again, this is about reflective practice. It's about your development. So taking it with that frame of mind, you are starting your journey as a reflective practitioner in this sector. So you would deal with different sections based on the different pathways. CMALT and Senior CMALT have all of these sections in there, and I'll touch upon them a bit more in detail in a second. And when we get to CMALT, we ask you to do a specialist area. So a specialist area is something that you're really quite proud of, and you've got a bit of focused practice in. And then for Senior CMALT, you want to see 2 of those plus an advanced area. And I'll provide a bit more detail on that in a second. I mentioned that contextual statement a moment ago. That is really important. It allows me as an assessor a way in to your world, and it doesn't have to be very long. A couple of hundred words, just to outline where you are, what your current role is, and how this actually relates to what you want to do in your career. So core area 1, operational issues. It's in 3 sections, the first of which is about benefits and constraints. And this section is a great opportunity to do some analysis. And it could be a project that you've already worked on, or something you're in the middle of, where you've been comparing the use of learning technology in a particular context. And what's really important here in your description is to show how your decisions are being made. So how you're evaluating a particular learning technology or particular digital education intervention, how are you evaluating that? So what criteria are you using to assess your options? And you probably might have an example where, let's say you're comparing synchronous platforms. You've got Zoom, you've got Google Meet, and you've got Adobe Connect, if that's still out there, and Teams. And maybe you've got a matrix there where you're comparing against a set of criteria. So explain to me, where did that criteria come from? How are you making your judgments? And how does that relate to your context? And that's a really neat demonstration of how you can show your understanding of the constraints and benefits of those technologies in a particular context. A couple of examples like that, perfect CMALT. So from that, you then need to reflect, what did you learn from that process? It could be at that point that you realized that maybe your first choice didn't actually meet the needs, because then you got some stakeholder input into that, and that changed the way you thought about things. Or it could be that you've already implemented it, and then you've uncovered some issues from it, or some opportunities from that implementation. So there's a nice bit of reflection you can put on there from understanding those benefits and constraints. 1B is on the technical knowledge that you have as a learning technologist. So this is about how you demonstrate your technical capability. Now, if you're in the thick of it and you are working with learning technology on a daily basis, then this is quite an easy one to demonstrate, because you just show me all the different things that you produced, or you show me the training that you've done and then how you've implemented it. If you just show certificates, that doesn't tell me much. So still we need to think about that description and reflection alongside that evidence of a certificate. But it really needs to be focusing on how technology is being used for learning and or teaching. So if it's just using technology to have a meeting, doesn't count. If it's using technology for an educational purpose, that's what I want to be looking at. So really important you don't lose sight of that part of the guidance, how technology is being used for learning and or teaching, or supporting learning and or teaching. If you're looking at the senior CMALT, you're probably either very experienced learning technologist, or if you're taking it from a point of view of a leader or senior leader or manager, your technical ability or technical knowledge may be probably one of the difficult sections to demonstrate, because you're not as hands-on. So you need to think about how you're using your understanding of technology to make decisions. So it could be that when you're appraising a new proposal for a new platform, how you're bringing your technical know-how into that decision-making process. So it's still possible to evidence your knowledge and ability, even if you're not hands-on. Finally, 1C is about deployment. And this is about the sort of the rollout, the support, scaling up. There's all sorts of things you can talk about the deployment here. So you've done your benefits and constraints, you've applied your technical know-how, and actually at this stage here, we're looking at how you roll it out, how you engage stakeholders and learners. So again, some really nice guidance here about the potential avenues you can go down, whether that's a technical implementation, whether that's an educational implementation, or something to do with change, how you manage a whole change process. Lots of things come out from this. And again, really important to reflect on that. So how well it went, what you would do differently. And I see some wonderful portfolios where people are reflecting on what they would do differently, and then they've gone in to do another implementation, and they've learnt and they've able to demonstrate their learning. So any questions on section 1? Either pop up your mic or pop it in the chat. Okay. So I've covered that guidance there. Looking at evidence then, some of the guidance for evidence is on certificates. So just like you can take a photo certificate, or if it's a PDF certificate, you attach it as an appendix. You can also have notes from colleagues you've worked with. I would recommend though that if you are using emails or notes from colleagues as evidence, that they're not your only source of evidence. Um, Unfortunately, it doesn't, most often the emails don't really say what you've done, and it doesn't always prove the output of what you've done. And actually seeing outputs, seeing preparation documents, seeing reports, they're a better demonstration of your practice than an email from someone who said this person was great, because you all are obviously, but this person was great. They did it, I couldn't have done it without them. It doesn't really tell me much about how you've done it or what you've done. So just be very cautious about using emails as a form of evidence, but they can be useful sometimes. Um, so going back to sort of 1A, where you've got that sort of benefits constraints, if you've got a document, or you can create a document based on what you did that shows that thinking, that shows that criteria, that's a nice piece of evidence to have. Reports, presentations you've made on any of those areas are really useful. Now you can redact those as well. So I'm conscious, particularly as I worked in a commercial setting, I wasn't able to share all the information that I wanted to share in my portfolio because it didn't align with my institutional policies. So I had to be quite selective and redact some bits out of it, but still showing what I was able to do through that process. The portfolios are confidential between you and the assessors. You get to decide what you share, and obviously, if you wanted to share afterwards your portfolio with the broader audience, that's entirely up to you. But I'm aware that some institutional policies even will allow that. So see what you can share as evidence, redact what you need to redact in order to abide by your policies. But don't be afraid of demonstrating that work in progress, because that's really good evidence of your thinking and your practice. So Steph has asked, if you don't have access to teaching, can you create speculative examples? So 1A, yes, because what you can do is you can use the CMALT process as an opportunity to evaluate a piece of technology. You have to be very clear about what context that technology would be in, but that is something you could do there. And again, 1B, quite easy to demonstrate technical capability in a broader sense through whatever setting you have available to you. 1C is slightly tricky to do if you're not able to demonstrate that within a working context, because you really do need to think about how you're implementing that, working with other people, and working in a particular context, and how that implementation responds to the constraints of that context as well. So that's one of the reasons why there's a bit of variation in the associate as well, in terms of the pathways. Catherine, you've also asked, sorry, Catherine's asked there, is it an issue if you have examples within the portfolio from more than one job role? For example, if you change your job role partway through your portfolio creation, they make the best portfolios. And I can tell you that because what happens is when you move to your different roles, you will start to have to think about what you've done in a different way. And actually, some of the best reflections are where people have shown an example from an old role, and then they've reflected on what they've learned from that and how they're applying it in their new role, or how they're using that thinking to inform how they do something differently in a new role or a new institution. So absolutely, your portfolio should represent you. It shouldn't represent your role description. So I'd love to see more portfolios of learning across different roles and what people have taken from one place to another. So moving on to core area 2, this is about an understanding of teaching, learning, and assessment practices. And I love this section as someone who really enjoys digital pedagogy. This is my opportunity here to bring together my understanding from research and from readings and theories, and then apply them. Um, this section actually is, particularly if you're looking at some other accreditation schemes, where you're supposed to demonstrate your understanding of pedagogy. This section is not about an academic essay on a particular theory. It is very much still about your understanding and your practice. So that connection, that interplay between pedagogy and technology, this is what needs to come out here. So if you just talk about learning theories, but you don't relate it to the use of learning technology or some examples, it's very difficult for us to assess your understanding of that interplay. Similarly, if you just talk about technology and you don't relate it to anything to the pedagogy, then you just talk about technology and there's no interplay there. So definitely use this as a demonstration of what makes us all very unique in terms of our professional sector. We're the sector that brings technology and pedagogy together, and that's what this section's all about. So in terms of the statements you can bring in here, talk about how you've contributed to the educational process. Now, if you're someone who runs courses yourself, you should have plenty in there to talk about learning design, the decisions you make around the choice of technology from a pedagogical basis, the types of interactions you want to have with students, which theories inform your design. If you're someone supporting educators, if you're supporting academics, it's a really good opportunity here to have those conversations with academics and ask them, why do you teach the way you teach? How does the discipline actually get taught? Because if you have those conversations, you start to understand the rationale between their methods and the learning of the subject. And then you can think about ways that the technology can support, enhance that. And again, there's some really nice frameworks about the use of technology. So, for example, the 3E framework that Keith Smythe originated quite some time ago, still really useful because it talks about 3 stages or 3 levels of that interplay between learning and technology. And I think some of those frameworks give you a bit of a scaffold to think about this section. So if you've never engaged with those types of frameworks before, then definitely have a look and see how they can scaffold your thinking here. So again, if you're not directly teaching or you're not directly assessing students, you just take the viewpoint, okay, how am I supporting those that do? What are the decisions I'm making or helping them to make make effective choices about the use of technology with a teaching, learning, and assessment framework or way of thinking in mind? So it's not just a case of, oh, there's this shiny thing over here we want to use. There's actually a learning purpose to it. Core area, I'm just going to move on to core area 3, but keep posting questions if as they arise in the chat. This is a fun section. It's all about how the broader context influences our work. Again, this should not be a commentary. So it's not about describing to the assessor what GDPR is or how freedom of information impacts the broader country. This is very much about these legislative areas and any institutional policies, how they actually affect you in your role. So if you're looking at copyright, for example, and you might be looking at the way you're using copyright protected resources, I'd expect to see something about the way that you're using licensing. So either using Creative Commons or you're seeking permissions, or you're making judgment calls about copyright resources and the risk factors associated with copyright resources. So something there about what you're doing within that broader context. Digital accessibility comes up an awful lot, and it's great to hear that. And so it should do. It should be out through the whole portfolio in my books. But anyway, so if you're doing anything about equality and accessibility, make sure you're referencing the applicable law or guidance that you're adhering to. The law around accessibility seems to be changing quite irregularly at the moment in terms of new policies coming in from the UK and the EU and broader. So if you're working in a context that you're providing international online learning, there's a lot to deal with. And then just talk about how that's influencing your decisions and how you're representing accessibility through your practice. And again, if you're supporting others, you need to focus then on how you are impacting the practice of others, how what you contribute as a professional in this area will actually support digital accessibility. So always look at this area from a point of view of how it's impacting you and then what you're doing about it. Don't do a commentary on sector. On my website, I actually did a blog post about how to write this section in particular. So I'll have to remember to find the link to that somewhere and post it on the website. So with Associate CMALT, you only need to cover one legislative area. So something where there's a bit of national legal, there's an act that relates to it, it's the Equality Act or Copyright Act, something along those lines. That's for Associate CMALT. CMALT candidates have to do legislative area and one policy area or another legislative area. So you got a choice there. And then for Senior CMALT, you have to do legislation and policy. So policy is really interesting. If you've got institutional policies or there are regulations that aren't legislative, I suppose, but policies that impact your context, it's more local, tends to be how you've either contributed to them and then that's impacted your practice, or how that policy exists and you've shaped it, or how that policy exists and you've had to work within it or even push the boundaries of it. The policy area can be really interesting, but make sure that you are explaining not just your contribution, but how it affects your ongoing role. There we go. That's what I just said. Statements to show how a relevant piece of legislation influenced your work. So you're not expected to be the copyright or accessibility guru, but you are expected to understand how it impacts your practice and demonstrate that as well. Moving on to core area 4. Sorry, I'm rattling through this because I'm conscious of time, but please do interrupt if you've got any questions. Core area 4 then is on communication and working with others, as it should say. The CMALT core principles, as I mentioned at the very beginning, one of which is about dissemination, one of which is about the empathy and willingness to learn from others. Core area 4 tends to be where a lot of this comes through. But obviously, as we talked about earlier in 1C, with the implementation, and indeed with section 2 on the assessment, learning and teaching principles, and that also involves a lot of communication working with us and what you learn from them. But this section in particular is about you and your behavior as a professional. So it's not just about I've done all my conference presentations. It's not just about I've been able to create these guides for students. Really want you to think about what makes you different from someone else. So how do you go into these different situations? How do you communicate in different ways with different audiences? How do you work in different groups in different ways? So take this moment to just take a step back and think about your role in those spaces. And you might have evidence such as testimonials, as I mentioned earlier. Think about how that really does show or not in your practice. And also where you've been working with others, call out your specific contribution. So it's an interesting area, and it's worth just, again, to try and separate it from some of the other areas, just thinking about your practice in different spaces and how you interact with others for that. So that's all the areas for the associate CMALT, and then these next areas only apply to the CMALT pathway and the senior CMALT pathway. So I'm just going to pick up Emma's question there in terms of could you use your roles within special interest groups? Absolutely. I mean, that's a really good example of where you are working with us, you're contributing to community, you're thinking about how you convey those ideas and how you bring everyone onto the same page in a special interest group. People have different ideas of what a SIG's about. What's your role in that space to bring those people together? So that's a lovely example. So specialist areas, again, I suppose special interest groups will come in here too. These are areas where you want to drill down into a particular area of practice. Again, loads of examples available in the guidance. What I'd suggest here is just to think about what makes it distinctive for you. So lots of learning technologists, for example, will be providing guidance documents. But if guidance documents and training of others is a key thing for you, it's something that you really want to be known for, then you need to think about, well, why is that? What makes my practice different from that other learning technologist over there who's also a specialist in guidance and training? So think about you, what makes you different from someone else, why it's a specialist area for you, and then give us some really, really good examples. And this is where that duration of time can come in as well, more so in the advanced area, but can be useful here in the specialist area, how you've built up that expertise over a period of time and how you've changed your practice over time. So this is like your what you want to be known for bit. So if someone in your institution or within the community was describing you, they said, yeah, they're a specialist in something, then you can put that in this section. It's a good opportunity as well if you don't have a specialism to develop one as part of the CMALT process. Future plans. Looks like we've skipped over the advanced area. I'll see if I can find the next slide for that in a second. The advanced area on the senior CMALT pathway is not just a specialist area plus. The advanced area is really looking at it over a number of years. So an advanced area is something that's an advanced bit of practice that you've really got a really in-depth understanding, and then you could convey that to someone else and lead that area. So there is a separate recording that we did as part of CMALT week on the difference between CMALT and senior CMALT, and we really drilled into the advanced area in there as well. But if we've got some time, I'm happy to answer some more questions on that. So future plans, it's another section in the portfolio, not assessed, just gives an idea of where you want to go next. And again, this is about you as engaging with a reflective process. After you put your big portfolio together, you're probably thinking, okay, I've done a heck of a lot here, which is great. What does this mean for me? Do I want to stay where I am? Do I want to go in more depth in terms of where I am in my role? Where's my career trajectory? It's just giving you that opportunity to articulate that to yourself more than anyone else, but it is part of the portfolio. And then finally, a confirmation that everything you put in your portfolio is duly recognized. It is your own. It's your own practice, accurate representation, and make sure you're honest and fair. So that's the portfolio structure. Any other questions on what goes into the portfolio? Again, you can please feel free to pop in the chat. Or if the mic functionality is available, you can do that as well. Quick question on the recording. Yes, the recording and deck will be shared afterwards. So submission and assessment. Make sure you've ticked off all the boxes. Pretty easy, isn't it? But also pay attention to this right-hand side, that you are very clearly and concisely describing your examples for each subsection. Make sure you've included that reflection. Use the guidance on reflective writing, those prompt questions, and make sure that you've got the right evidence. Sadly, we do have some portfolios who don't provide much evidence, and we have to send it back because we don't actually see the evidence of that practice. Those four core CMALT principles, They're a layer that covers the entire portfolio. We want to see those throughout. So just make sure that your portfolio is covering those core CMALT principles. It's not just a case of providing all the examples. Again, this is what makes us unique. This is what makes our profession unique. And that's what those principles are there for. And certainly proofread or ask someone else to proofread your portfolio, and they can help you with things like, are you explaining your own context in a way that someone who doesn't know your context can be understood? That's a very helpful process to go through before you submit. We will then, as assessors, grade each section as either strong, adequate, or revisions. Most portfolios will come back with adequate in terms of the grading. Some of them are really, really good in terms of that criticality of reflection and really thinking about yourself and your practice, and that goes through in strong. Nice question here about, can we use AI for proofreading? Give it a go. I mean, maybe that's part of 1A in terms of the pros and cons of different learning technologies. It'd be interesting to see the outcome of that. And I think if you are using AI to support you in the development of your portfolio, then please make sure you declare it. This is about being open, honest, and transparent. And we want to be as inclusive as possible. So if you are using AI to help scaffold your thinking, include it in there. This is all part of professional practice. I would not recommend using AI to write your portfolio, because then it doesn't become about you and it doesn't become about your own professional development. And we will probably detect it because it won't cover the types of criteria that come through. As an assessor, I've read some phrases multiple times, and I have a hunch that something's not quite right here. So I would just say use AI in a way that's in keeping with the principles of our profession. Be really interesting to see that example though, in terms of the impact of it. Then there are different outcomes. You can pass or pass with distinction. If you get a referral, it's not the end of the world. And again, see this as a development opportunity. If it's minor revisions, there'll be some really clear feedback. Might just be one or two things. We recommend that you tweak. Anything that's like a whole section that just needs completely looking at, or if there's reflection missing, and that tends to be the main cause of any referrals. There's not enough reflection, or the reflection isn't about you as an individual and the questions that we put in that guidance, then that will come back as a referral. And then on the second submission, so you get an opportunity to submit again. You'll either end up with a pass or a fail. And wherever possible, we will be supporting you not to fail. A lot of the assessors in the community are really here to help you develop and to get a cracking portfolio. So this is what makes it such a great community to be part of, and that peer community with you. The submissions are ongoing, so you can email your submission at any time. This is what I mean by the submissions pilot. It just means that there's no hard cutoff. I would recommend to you that either you buddy up with someone and you give yourself a deadline that you can both stick to, or you stick something in your calendar, say, look, I'm really going to get my submission in before the end of August, before term starts again, or whatever, just to give you that deadline to work towards, or even just set some interim deadlines. I want to do my section 1 this month, section 2 next month, section 3 next month. Because you don't have the submission deadlines, it's really important that you set your own. And you submit by email. There's some guidance on the website. After CMALT, then ignore the submission windows reference here. There's a community that you'll be part of. You get to become a member, and there's also, I think it's a 3-year window where you renew your portfolio too. So yes, it's 3 years. So you can keep your status, and it's a light touch process, very light touch. You don't have to rewrite your whole portfolio. Some people do, and some people will start off with associate. 3 years later, they want to submit for CMALT. 3 years later, they do senior. Some people every year will resubmit if they're moving up or moving across different pathways. It wholly depends on your circumstance. So key thing though is your portfolio. It's got to represent you. And we do encourage you to share. Every CMALT portfolio has been peer assessed, and it's a good way of showing your practice. Finally, do become an assessor. It's a lovely way of finding out what's happening in the sector. You support your fellow colleagues in the profession, and I would highly recommend it. You only have to do 1 or 2 a year if you want, or you can do like me and do loads, but it's entirely up to you what you want to engage with. But yeah, definitely worth looking at being an assessor. That's all the stuff I've got to talk through. So if you've had your fill, thank you very much for joining. I'm here for questions, so please feel free to post any in the chat. And if there's anything else we can do, then please also do shout. It looks like there's a discount there as well. That's handy. So get your registration sorted.
Hi, Matt. I've got a couple of questions, if that's okay.
Yes, go for it.
I've just taken a picture of that QR code, and it's saying the promotional discount code is no longer accepting responses. Try contacting the owner. So just,
well,
I don't know if there's another way we can get that.
I think Katie's on the call. I'll just ask Katie if this is still the right slide. If not, this is embarrassing.
Okay.
No, it's just, yeah, it looks like it's just valid for the CMALT week.
So that is not that the 20% isn't now available. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, right. We'll have to scrap that then. So.
and my actual, that's all right. My actual question. So is there anybody available that we can actually have a chat to even work out whether the work that we do on a day-to-day basis would be worthy is the wrong word, but would be applicable for a qualification like this?
Yeah. We had some windows during CMALT week where there was an opportunity to have one-to-ones with assessors. And I'm just in conversation with the CMALT group at the moment to see if we can set some more of those up again. So CMALT week was in May. Is that right? Yeah, I think it was. And we'll try and put some more of those in. There was definitely an interest within the community to do some more of those. So we don't have any dates at the moment.
Okay.
But I would also say, if you wanted to just get a sense, just email CMALT at alt.ace.uk, and they can always forward it to me if there's no one else to answer. And I'm happy to have a quick chat as well.
Lovely. Thanks, Matt.
Okay.
I just had a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So my question was, I'm currently in Gateway for my level 5 digital learning design. So I've done my portfolio for that, and a lot of this, I feel like I can lift and sift bits. Is that okay?
Yeah, it is. Though I would just make sure you adhere to that description, evidence, and reflection.
Sure.
A lot of lift and shifts, particularly from things like Advanced HE or CEDA, or there's another one that we've got some alignment to as well. The criteria is just subtly different. So it's not necessarily a copy and paste job, but it's more about using the evidence and the examples.
Yeah, the examples, I think I'm quite lucky. I think they'll really match because I did cover a lot in like a lessons learned piece about future plans and stuff. And
good.
Yeah.
So it's really, really key then to, again, relate it to your practice. The language that some of the other accreditation schemes use sometimes distances it from you as a first person. So again, just make sure you look very carefully at the differences between the two. On the CMALT website, there is a list of the mappings between some other accreditations, and that might help also if you're looking at that.
Oh, perfect. I find it's always quite hard to say, I did this, I did that, because we're not always those kinds of people sometimes.
No, and that is absolutely, it is a something that you really do need to think about in terms of blowing your own trumpet a little bit more. But it's a reflective process. It's not just about I'm amazing, because we all are, yeah. But also recognizing where your gaps are and where you want to do what you want to do next, and being quite open and transparent about that.
Because I feel for myself doing my digital learning design course and things has given me the confidence maybe I didn't have. Not so much that I'm changing what I'm physically doing, but the way in which I go about presenting myself with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that justification definitely should come through the portfolio.
Thank you very much. It was really,
You're
really
welcome.
informative.
Welcome.
Cheers.
Okay, we've got another question. El Piniki.
That's right. Yes. Hi. Right. My question is, I've changed jobs, and a lot of what I guess we'll consider evidence, I don't have access to anymore because they're
Ah,
internal things. So I can't provide
yeah.
you with a screenshot or a link or anything like that. Does that mean that I can't include them and I have to
Mm.
find, new projects to evidence, or is there a different way I can reference them?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And unfortunately, I would say the evidence needs to be there. So either if you've got a contact at your previous place of work that is able to help you with that evidence, or even to back up your statements, that's where emails can sometimes come in. If that individual can actually outline what you did on that project. The other thing I can think of doing is knowing what you have done. What can you, I suppose, is there sort of something that you can demonstrate your learning maybe in your new context, building upon what you did previously? So I'm just trying to think off the top of my head now what that might be. Let's say you built a course in your old place of work that used a particular technology. You've learned from that and you've implemented that in a new way in your new role. Then you can use your new role evidence, even if it's just I suppose, a mock-up of what you would now do in that new role based upon your learning on the old role. Does that make sense? I'm not sure it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, it's a very apt example as well because it's exactly the example I wanted to show that I developed the whole course on a
Mm.
VLE, and although I haven't done the same thing in the new VLE, maybe if that would be acceptable, I could do that.
Yeah, so you're using that learning and you're changing it and learning from it, and now this is the new output. That new output is just as valid evidence as the original. So I think that would be a really good way of doing it. Yeah, it's tricky. It is tricky, and I think that goes back to my point as well about sort of things that are redacted and things you can't share from certain institutions. So um, it's one of the reasons why, if you're thinking about doing CMALT, it's always worth collecting your evidence as you go. And certainly now, to always store a little bit, if you're allowed to, of course, just for future portfolios.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay. I think that takes us to time. Thank you very much, everyone. I know a lot of people left. Thank you very much for joining today, and we'll send the recording and the slides out shortly.